Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
You know, Wobbles, I'm kind of mad at you.
And as a reasonable man, I'm willing to do whatever's necessary to find a peaceful solution to these problems.
Welcome to Punching Up the Movie Podcast, aka Pump, where two long-standing friends and movie lovers, myself, Damian, hi, and Adam,
hi,
my esteemed co-host, take a film, either a cult classic or just a plain classic, that one or both of us have issues with, and the battle of supremacy of opinion begins. Firstly, thanks very much for listening. We appreciate any and all engagement in our humble podcast in this massive, vast ocean that is the world of pod. Today, we're going to be taking on John Carpenter's 1978 schlock horror classic, Halloween. Now, I nominated this one, and I think there may be butting of heads at some point. So, Adam, would you give us a synopsis of this film, please?
Yes, it'll be quite a brief synopsis. It's in the town of Haddonfield in Illinois. A young boy murders his sister with a knife. He's arrested, put in an institution for about 20 years. He escapes from the institution, pursued by his longtime doctor, Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, who believes very, very sincerely that he's not a human. He's pure evil. The boy in question, Michael Myers, goes to the town of his birth, puts on a Halloween mask, dons a workman's overalls, and sort of freaks people out, stalks people, seems to focus in on one person in particular, a teenager, Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. And then as night falls, systematically sets about murdering her friends and stalking her, and rendering himself somewhat indestructible in the process as Loomis tries to find him for a reckoning on the night of Halloween.
Yeah, great. Lovely. Sounds good, mate. That sounds like a great film.
Yeah, it does, doesn't
it? Okay, so a little bit of background on the film. Two producers, young producers, Mustafa Akkad and Irwin Yablans, approached John Carpenter after enjoying his previous film, Assault on Precinct 13, that he made for next to nothing. They'd wanted to make a low-budget horror film. And so he brought Carpenter the basic idea, which was a killer escapes from a mental institution and returns home to stalk babysitters on Halloween night. That would probably be in a better synopsis, to be fair. A briefer synopsis. Not a better, briefer.
I was going to say, the gloves are off already, aren't they? It's like,
yeah, of course, mate. Why not? That's what it's called, punch it up.
Wow.
So apparently Mustafa Akkad provided the $300,000 budget. And Yablans had brought the idea. So John Carpenter started to write the film with his then girlfriend and collaborator, Deborah Hill. And the contributions were basically Carpenter focused on the suspense, the pacing, and the mythology of the story. And then Deborah Hill focused on the teenage girl's characterization, the dialogue, and creating the suburban atmosphere. Hill had named the town Haddonfield after her own hometown, Haddonfield, which was in New Jersey, and then this was moved to, as you said, Illinois. So Michael Myers was John Carpenter and Deborah Hill always wanted to make Michael Myers more of a kind of he's referred to as the shape in the script. So more of a sort of just a killing machine, or like a character with no real psychology except the urge and desire to murder and create havoc. The concept was described as Jaws in the neighborhood. That's not right. It was never done like that, but that's what I thought about it this time around. It's very much Jaws, the killing machine that never stops. The original working title was The Babysitter Murders, And Jamie Lee Curtis makes her film debut in Halloween. Before the film, she'd been in a few TV shows. I think she was in Charlie's Angels and appeared in an episode of The Love Boat with her mum, Janet Leigh. Jamie Lee Curtis, famously the daughter of Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis, so Hollywood royalty. She was 19 years old when she made Halloween. Carpenter wanted Donald Pleasence to play the part. And according to an anecdote by John Carpenter, Donald Pleasence decided to take the film because one of his daughters liked the music for Assault on Precinct 13. Although that's never really been verified, it's just been anecdotal by Carpenter. And apparently Pleasance said he didn't understand it, didn't know what was going on, but he'll just do it because of his daughter. So fair enough. I mean, that kind of created his own more iconography for Donald Pleasence, which we'll get into. The budget was, as I said, $300,000, and on its original release, it went on to earn around $47 million, which is a massive return on their meager investment. Its success helped establish it as one of the most influential low-budget horror films ever made. And we can get into the nitty-gritty, and that's a basic background to the film. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. No, I don't. Other than I read, I don't know, I didn't really do any research on this, but I remember sort of hearing that Peter Cushing was originally offered the role of the Donald Pleasence character, but turned it down because he found it was too vulgar and distasteful. It was too violent for him.
Okay, fair enough. Not Hammer enough.
Not Hammer enough, no. Not Star Wars enough either, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess he's done that as well. So
yeah. So I nominated this film because I was just never really been a fan of it. It's obviously massively up there and heralded and lauded as a horror masterpiece. I just always used to find it a little bit boring. I think personally, I'm not a massive fan of slasher movies. I find them without the psychology. I think the psychology is the thing that I enjoy the most about these things. Like if you humanize a bad guy, it makes him vastly more interesting. But this is its own thing. You know, they intentionally sort of making this character like that to instill the idea of inherent evil, isn't it? How Donald Pleasence describes it. So, and I've seen it several times. I think I saw it a few times when it on video when it came out, maybe in the early 80s. But it was not an Evil Dead for me. Like Evil Dead was I go back and see that again and again, which I have done over the years. But Halloween was never really that. And then I'd seen it a few years ago and felt the same way, which was kind of why I decided to bring it into this. And I know that Adam really loves it. And so I rewatched it again. And yeah, my opinion's not changed really. There's some fantastic bits in it and it's really well made. Obviously, when we do these films, you kind of tend to watch them with more artistic eyes, focused on the sort of like artisticness of it all, the cinematography and the way it's filmed and the music. I do love the music in it. I think the music's very effective. It's kind of influenced by Herman Psycho a little bit. Very simple yet effective, and also influenced surely by Goblin's music for Argento's films. I find it a little bit boring. The start's brilliant, and then I just get a little bit bored. He's just kind of carrying on walking around and trying to stabbing people, and wasn't that engaged. So over to you to defend and tell me why I'm totally and utterly wrong.
Well, I don't think I can convince you that you're totally and utterly wrong because you've watched this film so many times, and I would say my experience is almost exactly the same as yours in terms of viewing, but with exactly the opposite kind of response to it. Firstly, can I say just before we get bloody of knuckles, shall we say? I was listening to a lot of our earlier recordings, and I think this is the first time, and I have to commend you for this before we go at it. This is the first time that we've ever done a film that I really, really care about that's been in the crosshairs. And I was going back, and I think of three occasions, well, two of them where I think it was 2001 and Easy Rider. We said, oh, that's one of my favorite films. That's a top 10 for me. One Cut of the Dead, which you absolutely adore. So I have to say, this seems to be, reaping what I sow, chickens coming home to roost. So whatever happens, I deserve it. This is the first time you've been very gentlemanly and just allowed me basically to waz all over. Although, with the exception of One Cut of the Dead, I think I kind of conceded a lot on everything on 2001. Oh, Once Upon a Time in the West as well. I think I sort of rode back on that. And I've rode back on most things I think that you've really, really liked, apart from One Cut of the Dead. So, whatever happens in the next however many minutes is fine and dandy, and I salute you for up to this point being so gentlemanly. I didn't realize how horrible I'd been in sort of just basically singling out so many.
Also, I feel that maybe it feels like the last sort of 5 or so of films that I've chosen, and I was starting to get a little bit bored. Like, I want you to choose one, but then I was thinking, you need to give me a list of your favorite films, and I need to pick one and go, right, that's the one that I don't like.
You don't dislike a lot of my favorite films. That's the problem.
That's true, though, man. That's true. We have too much Venn diagram crossover.
Yeah,
anyway, carry on, mate.
No, that's fine. But then you reject a lot of the movies. You actually do. This is what the listeners don't. We haven't even started talking about Halloween yet. But what are the listeners? This is just a domestic now. What the listeners don't hear is I'll nominate things and you go, oh, I don't want to watch that. That's too long. I'll give you some. So Lord of the Rings, oh, I don't want to watch that. That's too long.
I mean, that's 3 films. You can't even put The Fellowship in there. I can't split them up. So that's 10 hours.
Yeah, no, you have got.
Go on. Who else?
I don't think I would want to watch that again. But so Halloween. I mean, my experience with Halloween is I saw it. I was aware of it. I was aware of what it was. Through magazines and like Starburst and things like that, and I saw it on television. And I remember seeing it on a black and white television, probably, kind of in my room, and it absolutely scared the living daylights out of me. I found it genuinely frightening. I was a child at the time, and I thought the ending, talk about the ending first, where Donald Pleasance shoot. It's become like a trope and a cliche now, but I'd never seen it done before. Where the shape is sort of blasted through a window, and then Donald Pleasance looks out of the window and he's not there. Having been killed and come back like twice before in the movie, he's been stabbed by Jamie Lee Curtis a couple of times, and then Donald Pleasance shoots him, and it just ends with this shot of an empty, and then I think this montage of all these buildings, which I think there's a lot of subtle sort of call and responses in the film, actually ends with this montage of buildings that he's killed people in, and then the last thing you see is the house where he commits his first murder, which is an abandoned house, and you just hear heavy breathing. Absolutely freaked the living daylights out of me. I've never seen anything like that. I've subsequently gone back to it, and and sort of it's had the same effect. It's not frightened me as much, but I saw it in a cinema a few years ago. They did a special screening of it, and I still felt it maintained its atmosphere from beginning to end. It had phenomenal command of tension, and escalating tension, and the mood was immaculate. I actually like the fact that the killer is almost motiveless, and I do think he has personality. I think even he's not just a blank. Jason's probably a little bit more of just a killing machine, whereas I think there's kind of almost wit in how Michael kills people. He doesn't commit that many murders in Halloween, but there's a wit in the way he does it. It's a great physical performance, I think, from Nick Castle, the stuntman. The way he's very kind of, he almost sort of preempts the Terminator in the way he's kind of, he's quite sort of angular in the way he moves, but then there's a bit where he stabs someone and it's almost like he's admiring a painting. He tilts his head, and that's a very sort of, there's a lot of personality in there. I think technically it's magnificent. I think all you have to do is watch any of the sequels to see how technically brilliant the first one is with its sort of what have become very Carpenter-esque figures, like the sweeping cameras, the way he puts something in the corner of the frame. And this is one of the controversies about the film when it got cut down to sort of a television aspect ratio. You're missing a lot of the Easter eggs because even now I'm seeing like Michael in the corner of the screen watching someone in the middle of what seems to be a domestic sequence. You've got you literally see a shadow on a balcony before you see him, and I think there's a lot of art in the way that you know the way he emerges from the shadow almost before the final confrontation with Laurie Strode. I think Jamie Lee Curtis's performance is wonderful in it. It's so natural. She's one of the most likable. I think the teenagers are really likable in it. It's sad when they get killed. That's not always the case in a slasher film. And by contrast, you have this like gonzo performance from Donald Pleasance to sort of balance it all out. Who's just the right side of when we get into Donald Pleasance, he goes. I think he's just the right side of mental and fanatical and it's not always the case in a Donald Pleasance driven movie, but and again the music's phenomenal, and I just think it's a controlled tense piece of horror movie making that sort of stood the test of time, and it's always creeped me out. I've always seen something new in it. I've always enjoyed it, and I just wish they hadn't made any more. I just wish they'd left it as this sort of standalone piece, and we can talk about its legacy and sequels and what Carpenter tried and failed to do with it, what his original intention was. But those are the reasons I love it, and probably more, which we can get into. But just take any of those strands and just have at them.
Great. No, to be honest with you, mate, it's fascinating hearing it because you're obviously seeing things that I'm not noticing, like the little Easter eggs or whatever, or the fact that maybe we watched it pan and scan back in the day and we missed out lots of those things. So technically, I agree with you. I think it is a brilliant film. Like the pacing is phenomenal. It's a tight 90, isn't it? Near enough, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
The music's brilliant. The cinematography's brilliant. The pacing's brilliant. I'm just not engaged really by it. I think that's my problem, that like I'm not really that frightened by it. And maybe now it's very different because, as you say, it's become very tropey. It's like, influenced so many different films over the years. So I don't have anything to push against with what you're saying. I kind of agree with what you're saying. But there's just a vast hole that, for me, when I'm watching a film.
Let's try and fill that hole with humanity, because I mean that's I think one of the things Stephen King talked about with horror. He said that the most important element in horror is love. He says you have to, and this is often something that's leveled at slasher movies. He says you have to have something that you love. I might be slightly distorting his quote, but I think he says you have to sort of have something that you love that the protagonist tries to destroy. You have to care. You have to care about the central protagonist as you put them through the mill. And often with slasher movies, they get obnoxious people, and you want to see them killed, and the fun is just seeing these people taken out by a monster who actually sort of becomes the reason you go and see it. And so none of this has been sort of unleashed on the world yet. We haven't sort of turned up to see Freddy dispatch people and quip about it, or Chucky, or just to see how revoltingly Jason can sort of take someone apart. And I think with this, what really anchors the film is Jamie Lee Curtis's performance, which I think is so natural, so likable. She's so smart in the movie, and there's so many sort of little indicators of a world beyond. Like I was just jotting down because I didn't know what it was. Like the fact they've got a poster of a James Ensor on her wall. I didn't know who he was. Painter, Belgian painter, and she's just clearly very clever, and they have this sort of line where you can't believe that no one would go out with Jamie Lee Curtis even in that world, but how she's too smart, guys don't want to go out with her because she's too clever. And I think her friends are likable, and they could have just been sort of just people. Even the boyfriend, normally you get the bro or the jock. He's the first person you want to see killed. His relationship with his girlfriend's actually quite sweet. I think the kids are nice. There's a lot. It's called The Babysitter Murders. You got two children. They're really likable. The relationship between the kind of the teenage and the kids, even though they're quite irresponsible babysitters sometimes, are it's really nice. So I think at the heart of it, if it was all technique, it would just be hollow to me. But I think what you've got at the heart of it is this brilliant performance by Jamie Lee Curtis. And I know we disagree on like the direction of her career. Like now, I really don't enjoy her acting now that she's this kind of very loud, important actor and sort of activistic sort of personality. And I just love the fact that she's coming out of the gate with this just really, I think one of the best performances, actually quiet, gentle. And then when it all hits the fan, she's sort of credibly terrified and sort of, there's a genuine sense of jeopardy when she fights back and things like that, And then there's Donald Pleasance. I mean, to me, Donald Pleasance is like almost like the secret sauce in the film as well. He's just like the horror movie character you want. The monster hunter. I suppose he's like the sort of Van Helsing with a sort of high powered gun and things like that. So I think the performances are really good, and I think the technique is immaculate, and the performances are really good. What do you think about those two, Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance?
Yeah, I love Jamie Lee Curtis in it. I mean, I think she's great, whatever she does really, but obviously it's nice to see her very still and very young. And then I went on to watch a few other of her performances, which we'll get onto in a second. Donald Pleasance, though, I wasn't overly enamored with his performance. I found it very kind of robotic almost. And I know Pleasance has his own kind of way about him, the way he speaks and the way he delivers his lines. And as brilliant as he is, and over the top in something like Waking Fright, or as kind of still and bumbling and blind in The Great Escape. I believe him in those films. Like I not enjoy his acting, but then when I was watching this, I was like, I just want something more. It almost felt like he was phoning it in, and he, probably wasn't getting paid a great deal of money for it. So yeah, I disagree with, well, not disagree. Yeah, I disagree with you on the Donald Pleasance. I didn't find him. Yeah. But yeah, I did love Jamie Lee Curtis. I watched Road Games, which I'd never seen. Have you seen that? That's really good.
I was thinking about watching Road Games, but I just didn't really have the time or the energy. I'd seen it, just in my initial flurry of going around my mate's house and watching, watching sort of VHSs. We watched Road Games, and I remember I've got very fond memories of it. All I really remember is it's got Stacey Keach in it, hasn't it? And I remember a very, very sort of tense, slow ending with a sort of jammed truck. Is that right? There's a sort of yeah. So I remember it was very good, and I know that its reputation has grown over the years as a really kind of underrated sort of Australian set, isn't it? Sort of slasher movie.
Yeah,
It's probably
Richard
like
Franklin's.
one of the best of her post Halloween. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Probably the most enjoyable film, well, apart from something else, but it was the most enjoyable film in this sort of run of Carpenter and Spiderweb. That I loved Stacey Keach. I thought he was brilliant. He's just like monologuing to himself all the way through, and he's very charming, and you believe him. And obviously Jamie Lee Curtis is in it, and she's very good as well. Kind of a different energy to Laurie Strode, a little bit more playful, a little bit more adventurous. Yeah, really good. I enjoyed Road Games a lot, and I watched Blue Steel a few months ago as well, which I'd never seen. So Blue Steel and Road Games. Blue Steel I hated. I thought it was just like an 80s flipping. What is going on, mate? This is so unbelievable. It's just like I'm not buying any of this. And that was Bigelow, wasn't it?
That's the one about. Is that the one about that she's a female cop and a guy steals a gun and goes around
it's
people like a lawyer, isn't it? Is it Ron Silver?
Ron Silver, there you go. Yeah. Ron Silver, who's great in that. But in this is a very, it's very hammy, and the film itself is just. Oh, Clancy Brown's in it as well, as her sort of boss, I think. Yeah, didn't like that at all. But like her, I don't think I've seen Jamie Lee Curtis be bad. Like she's had this resurgence since Everything Everywhere, and going on to The Bear, but before that, I don't know that I'd seen a Jamie Lee Curtis film for a long time. She's not like an actress that I go, oh, I want to see her films, but I always know that she's going to be good. If she turns up in something, I never feel like she's dropping the ball. Um, I watched and this is kind of in the same world. I watched Dress to Kill, and I'd said it was like what do you call it? Red Shoe Murders or whatever is what's it called? Red Shoe Diaries. It was like the Brian De Palma's a bit of a joke, I reckon, mate. Might have to go in on him a little bit at some point for something because, yeah, that's a bit of a joke of a film, and that was another one of those that I knew about back in the day, but for whatever reason never watched. The Fog, I watched The Fog last night. I think I'd seen it before. That's all right. I mean, it's all right. It's kind of, yeah, it's all right, mate. What I did like in The Fog was Adrienne Barbeau's performance. I
As,
thought
as
she
the
was great.
DJ in the lighthouse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she was brilliant, mate. And then,
I like the fog. I think it's sort of minor. It's like sort of B plus Carpenter. But I think there's some genuinely scary moments in it. I'm not sure the rules of the fog make that much sense when you
yeah,
subject them
yeah,
to close
yeah.
analysis. Like what the ghosts are there for and who they end up killing seems a bit. They seem to have a mission and they seem quite indiscriminate in who they kill, in terms of like yeah. But, and I don't think it makes much sense. It seems probably a little bit more thrown together, but I enjoyed it, and I think if you kind of isolate like the sequences, the scares and things like that, I think it works quite nicely. And I think the pirate ghosts are great monsters as well. I like them with their glowing eyes and like silhouette hooks and
Yeah, I want to see more glowing eyes. I think like when you watch the film, if you only see glowing eyes like right at the end or something.
Oh,
But
is that
I think if because it's on the poster, isn't it, or something maybe.
I don't know.
But
I
the
just
glowing
remember glowing
eyes.
eyes. I can't remember the poster that much. Yeah.
I think so.
So
I
yeah,
think it's
yeah.
got loads
Well,
of them.
I actually think I started falling out of love with Jamie Lee Curtis's sort of acting, actually weirdly with the I mean we're jumping way ahead now with the most recent resurgence of Halloween, which is a sort of Danny McBride, David Gordon Green trilogy. I loved the first one. I don't know if you watched any of those. And she's and it's the sort of trope at the moment. It's a trauma horror film, not a trauma horror film, a trauma horror
Hmm.
film where it's all about, they what they do is which a lot of horror franchises do, they kind of just rewrite the canon. It's like we're pretending that anything after Halloween didn't happen. Halloween 2, which we can talk about, and how that completely changes the mythology. That didn't happen. And Michael Myers is a man, which doesn't make that much sense actually, because they can't square the circle on that one. He's a man, albeit in his 60s. And he's still got the Jones to kill Jamie Lee Curtis, which, as it turns out, we need to mention that now. It turns out that they're brother and sister in Halloween 2, which I'd always misremembered that. I always thought that was part of the first film, but it's something that's completely invented for the second movie. And Jamie Lee Curtis is great. In the first one, she plays like a sort of traumatized Laurie Strode, who's a survivalist, sort of locked in a house, waiting for him to come back, booby traps, guns. She's completely alienated her children who think she's a lunatic. And then he comes back and there's a great confrontation. And had the film ended there, it'd be great. But Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. I think they just indulge Jamie Lee Curtis too much, and she just becomes too big. Too unlikable as well. And to make Laurie Strode really unlikable is quite an achievement. And well done, Danny McBride and David Gordon Green. And I just think her acting is just off the hook. And you hear her in like press tours around about the time, and she's sort of just got the bit between her teeth about this film. It's about trauma. It's about, well, it is, but it's still a Halloween movie. And she's sort of big, and her acting's kind of important, and I find that a bit with, even you're going to hate me for this, even in The Bear, which I think she's correctly cast and she's balanced out by so much. I find the scenes, even though she's supposed to be sort of this damaged matriarch who's effectively wrecked her family with her moods and her sort of chemical imbalances, I sort of find it too much sometimes, and I really miss the quiet, subtle, Jamie Lee
Mm.
Curtis, and like you said, the playful one, because I was looking at her filmography in the 80s, and it's actually quite extreme. You forget how many really high profile films she was in, like sort of Trading Places and A Fish Called Wanda, and then True Lies, True Lies in the 90s. And so she
Yeah,
went
yeah.
from horror into sort of comedy and light comedy, very, very skillfully, and then she's won her Oscar. I remember liking her in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I haven't gone back and watched it. And then all of a sudden she's been anointed. It's like this has been a long time coming. You've got this Oscar. And in a way that certain performances change certain actors, I think, and their acting's never the same. I think her acting's not the same after that. And she's big and she's grand. She's almost like sort of
After Everything Everywhere.
after
Mm.
getting after Everything Everywhere, because I think Halloween was kind of on the back of that. In the same way that Al Pacino is a different
I
actor
was
after
thinking Al
Scarface.
Pacino,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It's sort of you could argue Jack Nicholson's a different actor after The Shining. They're big, they're
Mm.
brash, they've got the thing they do. And I think she's almost like the female equivalent of that. And I sort of, if she's in something now, I'll kind of like step back a bit. Um, Although apparently she's very, very funny in the Freaky Friday films, which I've not seen, and
Mm.
but that's comedy. She's gone back, but yeah. So I sort of miss what she does in those early slasher films, where her performance I don't think was particularly lauded, as it isn't in horror films, and she holds that movie together in terms of its humanity. I like
Mm.
Donald Pleasance. I've always liked him. He's basically got a blank check with me. He can do anything he wants because he's a bit of an outlier in British actors. I think the only this might sound weird. The only actor I think that compares to him in terms of what he represents to British acting is Gary Oldman, because they seem to kind of just completely not be interested in the kind of restrained underplaying British acting tradition or the theatrical tradition, and they just make wild choices, big, massive swings. Sometimes they fall on their face. Sometimes it absolutely lights the movie up, and
Mm.
but you kind of respect the swings they take and the fact that these guys are quite anarchistic actors. And I love the fact that Donald Pleasance was doing that in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And yeah, he's an actor that never said no to a job, basically, and
Mm.
turns up everywhere. He does these creepy, health and safety water act with some of the scariest things I've ever watched
Mm.
as a child. I've got a children's album with him doing the narration on it. I think, well, who thought of that? That was they either deserve firing or being given like a bonus. And he's, so I just think I love him. And did you know we were taught by his daughter once? I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, Angela. Yeah.
You talked about one of his kids. That might have been the kid that talked him into
That,
Angela
well, that's what I
Presence.
was trying to find out.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
tried to go deep and
Mm,
find out if it was Angela, and then I was going to talk about Angela that we were taught by her, but
yeah.
that could never be confirmed. They said it was probably her because she was like
Yeah.
artistic,
Yeah.
but who knows?
She also, have you seen them act together? Have you seen if you haven't, I'd recommend, because it's a quiet performance, a creepy and quiet performance. They play father and daughter in one of the anthology horror movies, the British Amicus ones, From Beyond the Grave, I think it is. And he's
Okay.
so quiet and creepy. He plays a blind, oh, is he blind? Yeah, he plays a blind veteran who kind of hooks, I think it's Ian Bannon in, um, and almost pimps his daughter out to her, who's really sort of quiet and kind of demure, but very creepy. And they are both phenomenal in that, and that's
Mm.
kind of the flip side of Donald Pleasance, which is quiet and insidious and utterly malevolent and stuff.
It was
So, so
it wasn't in 10 Rillington Place. That was Attenborough, wasn't it?
no,
Wasn't he in something like that?
that he. It feels like he should have been, but I can't think of it. Yeah, it was
Mm.
Richard Attenborough in 10 Rillington Place
Yeah,
as John
yeah.
Christie, No, yeah, he could have done that. He's very good. He's very good in The Flesh and the Fiends, actually, which is it's a really awful title, but it's a film about Burke and Hare, and it's got a trio of, again, just different, because it's about kind of evil across the class
Yes, I
divide.
watched
Yeah,
that. You told me about that.
I
Yeah,
did. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Peter Cushing is kind of imperious and sort of evil, and they're like feral working class, evil Irish kind of basically walking its, aren't they? You just go around murdering and delivering bodies to
Mm.
Dr. Knox, and
For dollar.
but also his influence extends. I mean, he's the Blofeld of all the James Bond Blofelds that Mike Myers seizes on and turns into Dr. Evil. So he mixes Donald Pleasance with Lorne Michaels, doesn't he? The producer of Saturday Night Live. So the
Yeah,
look and the
yeah,
body
okay,
language of
yeah.
Donald Pleasance. So his sort of, considering he was like this kind of just never said no to a paycheck actor, his influence is kind of all over the place, isn't it? And
Yeah, yeah.
I love him. He's one of my favorites. I absolutely love him. I even put I wrote I don't think we ever mentioned my I used to write history books, and
Mm.
I've put in one of them a dedication to my friend Simon. I shot him 6 times. I put in a he's got nothing to do. He's got absolutely nothing to do with the history I was writing about, which I'd misremembered and thought was in like sort of Halloween 1, but that's him sort of just looking back at what he did in Halloween, thinking could have got a bit further with that character,
Yeah.
and sort of gives you it in Halloween 2, doesn't he? And he's like, I shot him 6 times. And that just becomes a shorthand for me and my mate for just glorious overacting. It's like, I shot him 6 times.
Yes, yeah, very true. So Halloween 2, I was very bored with Halloween in a hospital. Um, what about you?
Yeah.
Did you like it? Did you enjoy it?
No, not really. Again, I'd seen it. I don't think I'd seen it since I was a teenager, and that was the one of the three I struggled with the most. I just thought it was boring. It was boring. The characters weren't very likable. They pretty much bench um, Jamie Lee
Jamie.
Curtis until the end because
Mm.
she's sort of like sedated in a hospital bed. Yeah, Donald Pleasance gets more screen time. Um, I like that. I felt like I felt almost watching it. You kind of it's a good way of seeing how well Halloween is made, because it just feels like you've got the way you described Halloween is the way I found watching Halloween 2. Is it just seemed to be a bit soulless, a bit done for the money, which I think it was. And then the introduction of the family connection doesn't really, it genuinely feels shooed in. When you find out that Michael and Laurie are brother and sister, um and that'll come to dominate the subsequent sequels, and especially the Rob Zombie ones or the reboots and things like that. And I just thought, yeah, it felt sleazy in a way that the first one didn't. Even the first one, you still have the
Mm.
sort of mandatory sort of TNA, but it didn't
Mm.
feel quite as salacious, whereas it felt really sleazy.
Yeah.
Um, in two, the kills were just almost for their own sake. I think the one that really works is like just because you get a sense of the power is the scalpel in the back and him just sort of lifting the nurse with one arm. I quite like that. It's different
Mm.
actor. It's Dick Warlock, isn't it? Like a
Mm.
different stuntman, and he doesn't have the same sort of physical fluidity as Nick Castle. I think I felt you could see the difference. It felt a bit cosplay, and yeah, I just and I think is it shorter than the first Halloween? I'm not sure. Might not be. It felt a lot
Yeah,
longer.
maybe.
Yeah, it just felt
Mm.
like what it was. It just felt like for the numbers. Um, let's do this again. John Carpenter clearly didn't want to direct it. Gives it to one of his
Rick
cohorts.
Rosenthal, was it? I think
Yeah,
it
Rick
was.
Rosenthal.
Mm.
And I don't think he was one of his co-hosts. That was Tommy Lee Wallace, wasn't it, for three?
That's right, yeah, who ended up
Yeah, who was
directing
his
three.
production designer and stuff.
I enjoy three. I've
I
enjoyed
enjoy three.
three
Yeah.
from when I was a kid. I always loved Halloween 3 for whatever reason. It didn't have to have Michael Myers, like, because I wasn't really bothered about Michael Myers anyway. I love the sort of demented nature of it all. I love the ding 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 ding. I mean, that's just so indelibly sort of burnt into my brain from back then. And I enjoy the story. It's nice to see what's his name? Tom what's the
Adkins.
yeah, Tom Atkins, yeah, who was in quite he was also in Escape from New York, which I rewatched again, and it's like 5 stars, mate, for five
Yeah,
stars.
Donald Pleasance. Just
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a
yeah.
sidebar, what do you think? Because he's properly over the top in that.
He is, but he's also massively in a traumatic situation that,
Yes.
somebody way out of his depth would potentially behave like that. So I bought that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, nice to see Tom Atkins in three as the main thing. He's kind of he looks a little bit like Manimal between human and animal.
I was trying to describe him, I think, to my brother. Oh no, yes, I said he looked like Chuck Norris's mustachioed, slightly out of condition brother. I thought he was good. I like him as an actor, but I had some fun like with them negotiating because he's a divorced man. He's just in case no one's seen. We were just assuming people have seen Halloween 3 and know the story and the background, and the background
Mm,
just needs explaining because Carpenter never wanted to make loads of Michael Myers films, did he? It was the franchise was always supposed to be a little bit like the Twilight Zone or something like that, self-contained horror stories that had kind of no connection other than they're all set on Halloween. And this one is about a malevolent Irish Willy Wonka style toy maker who wants to
yeah.
unleash a load of sort of masks, Halloween masks, fueled by the pagan power of a stone from Stonehenge that crush children's heads and cause snakes to come out of them.
Brilliant.
And it is a bit rough already, and it feels like
Yeah.
they put out the Carpenter B team, except where the music's concerned, which is absolutely brilliant. But it is
Mm,
demented, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, but
mm,
Tom Atkins really made me laugh because I think he's great, but it's just that kind of what genuinely passed for attractive in the 1970s is like slightly beyond me when it comes to men, and
yeah.
because he just looks hideous.
Yeah.
Yeah, they clearly established that the ladies like him. His wife doesn't like him. She gets a bit of a raw deal, and but he's got his sort of fellow doctor who's clearly got the hots for him, and then he it opens with a murder, doesn't it? And it's the daughter who looks a little bit like Margaret Qualley, who teams up with him, the daughter of this murder victim, and he looks about 50. She looks like she's just about 18, and they kind of get it on at one point. And there's even a bit, and you felt even in the 80s they had to put this line in where he goes, "How old are you?" And she goes, "Old enough." You think, yeah, if you say
Yeah.
so. And it's just
Yeah.
it's so creepy.
Yeah.
It's really creepy, but I think the film was great. I agree with you. You see, I'd never seen it. I'd never ever seen it. It was my first watch ever for
Wow.
Halloween 3.
Great.
And I was sort of aware of elements of it. I thought is it Dano? I'm going to mangle his name. Like the
Harley.
villain, the Irish
Harley. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Dano
Yeah.
Herley was
Oh,
fantastic.
Hurley.
He's like
Mm.
the kind of he's sort of like the Donald Pleasance, although he's a villain. The Donald, he's the great sort of character actor who I looked up his career. He'd sort of worked with Carol Reed, and James Mason in Odd Man
Mm.
Out, and he'd got an Oscar nomination for like working for Louis Buñuel for Robinson Crusoe, and then in the 80s he's doing stuff like this. And then he
Getting
goes, I've
paid.
never seen him before. Yeah, and he's the old man, like the CEO in the RoboCop movies, and he's
Mm.
phenomenal in this, and he's so charming and evil and quietly insane, isn't he? And yeah, he's
Mm.
phenomenal. I really and I really the bit that worked best was
Yeah.
the music, the sort of 3 days to
Mm.
have it was
Brilliant.
phenomenal, and the fact that
Silver
wave over the
shamrock.
climax, yeah. And
Yeah.
one of the things I love, without giving too much away, is I love Carpenter's nihilism as well. I just think he doesn't get enough credit for how bleak his movies are, even when they don't feel like they're bleak. Because I think it took a
Mm.
while for people to cotton on to the fact that the ending of The Thing is really nihilistic. If you just never made another Halloween movie, the ending of Halloween, I was just trying to imagine what it would be like if you just didn't have another one. And you didn't have this constant go around with Laurie Strode and Michael Myers, which gives you a bit of catharsis, and it just ended on that note, and there was never another one. The way it ends with the heavy breathing, and he's out there still, and you can't kill him.
Yeah.
Um, the ending of I love the sort of note of ambiguity that's probably not ambiguity that Halloween 3 ends on. It ends sort of on a free frame, doesn't it? Where you have to decide what the fate of the world is. And as it's Carpenter, it's probably going to involve a lot of dead children and things like that. And it was just terrific. I really enjoyed it.
That's the same in the end of Escape from New York. Is
Yeah.
very nihilistic. I mean, it's like, there could be nuclear war because of like what Snake has decided to do. I mean,
Yeah, he
it's
just decides. Yeah, he just decides. I don't. The world doesn't deserve to exist, or I just think it's really funny that the world ends. And yeah, because Snake Plissken's he's a psychopath. He's not a good man, and because Kurt Russell's so cool, you know, and everyone else is so evil and killable, and also because Donald Pleasance ultimately is so venal and dismissive, isn't he? It's just, like his last gesture, without giving too much away, although I would imagine most people have seen Escape from New York. Snake Plissken's last gesture is, you could argue, evil,
yeah,
it's just
pulling the tape
utterly,
apart.
utterly nihilistic. And I really like that about Carpenter. And he seems to sort of like, whatever the quality of his output, with a couple of exceptions, he seems to sort of, be consistent with that, doesn't he? He doesn't. And
Yeah,
when you
I
hear him
wanted.
interview,
Gone.
yeah. God knows, he doesn't seem to be a man who has a particularly like positive outlook about the direction of travel of humanity.
Yeah. I was thinking about the In the Mouth of Madness. Is it In the Mouth of Madness? Is that right? He
Yeah,
did that.
yeah,
And Prince of Darkness being the sort of three apocalypse sort of apocalypse
yeah.
trilogy. I was thinking I've not seen those for a long time, but I do remember Prince of Darkness scaring me. And that was like the
Mm.
first Carpenter film that was scarier. And I think that's rooted in Satanism and evil being unleashed and connected to sort of
Yeah, and
religious
and the kind of
upbringing. And
it's like this weird sort of combination of science and magic as well. And yeah, I still think that's his scariest movie. I saw a 4K restoration of that a few years ago.
nice.
And oh my goodness, it works so well. It's
Mm.
incredibly. You might argue it's his last great movie, I think, before he starts to sort of lose interest or his technique starts to desert him. And Donald Pleasance again, who's very good in that. And yeah, it's just, if people haven't seen it and they're in for it, they want to let themselves in for a kind of sort of nihilistic but brilliantly made sort of rough ride of a movie. It's phenomenal. But I think the ideas are scarier in that. I think the ideas he deals with, it's just like really, really sort of leans into cosmic horror. And
Mm.
also it's a homage to Nigel Neal, who arguably gets effed over in the writing of Halloween 3. So in a way, it feels more like a Nigel Neal project than the one that he's actually hired to write. So for those who don't know, do you want to say who Nigel Neal is for those who don't
No,
know?
no, you
Or
say, mate. You'll be able to say it much more articulately
well,
than me.
he's one of he's certainly one of the great British science fiction television writers, but I would argue he's probably one of the great, kind of TV writers, and famously created Quatermass and did the live broadcast with Donald Pleasance and Peter Cushing of 1984, which sort of caused a national stir and raised questions in Parliament. And his ideas are phenomenal. And he sort of has these ideas of his whole thing is like, man is this insignificant speck in the universe, and we're at the mercy of kind of alien forces that are barely aware of our existence. And I think in the and we're kind of lucky if we dodge these bullets, and there's normally a sort of man of science that sort of figures things out and sort of narrowly avoids an apocalypse, but at great cost. And with the caveat that there's always something out there, in the vastness of space, or even like sort of buried in our own stone. I think all the stone tapes about
Mm.
sort of evil layered in sound in stone and things like that, or in our past that can just snuff us out in an instant, and we're lucky if we can avoid it. And his work was brutalized and vulgarized in Halloween 3. He created a subtler piece of work that was a lot more psychological, and in terms of the town, because a lot of the second half of the film all takes place in this town that's been completely taken over by this evil corporation with manufactured humans, and you know, and that's a lot like the town in Quatermass 2, which is basically being used to almost like sort of terraform an alien environment that's eventually going to kind of take over Earth with all these kind of pod people. And much as I enjoyed Halloween 3, it would have been wonderful to see what would have happened if Nigel Neal had been given free rein to create something a little bit more subtler and suggestive. But you probably got that, kind of in Prince of Darkness. Although he had nothing directly to do with that, his influence is all over it. And John Carpenter's sort of gone on record, I think, of saying that Nigel Neal is a massive influence and stuff. So props to Nigel Neal.
Carpenter sort of denies any direct lineage to Giallo, although he, as far as influence on Halloween, and going back to Dress to Kill, and that was from the Giallo that we did, the Deep Red that we did a few episodes ago. The lineage, like the slasher movies, like they all come from that, right? I mean, what was the first slasher movie?
Psycho. I think they come from Psycho. I think Psycho's the year zero. I think you have an explicit reference in the casting of Jamie Lee. I believe him when he says that Giallo didn't influence him, because Giallo is a lot more lurid. It's a lot more baroque. It's a lot more sort of, it's controlled chaos, isn't it? It's out of control. It's like, and I think. I think there's too much control in the first Halloween. It's a really controlled piece of filmmaking, and I think its influence is Psycho. And you have you said it with the score. The score is sort of very sort of Psycho-esque, or a stripped down sort of subsonic version of Psycho, and then you cast Jamie Lee Curtis in it, and her mum's Janet Leigh, who was Marion Crane in Psycho. So he's making a statement casting her. This is like our version of Psycho. Although, obviously that, the killer in Psycho has an incredible amount of complexity in their how the personality. And I would argue that Anthony Perkins' work in that is the best performance in any horror movie ever. I think it's a phenomenal piece of acting. And the Shape obviously deliberately is devoid of personality apart from that urge to kill, and also his fixation with Laurie Strode. He singles her out, doesn't he? I think, which is interesting.
Let's have a little discussion about the teenage sex and the puritanical sort of values or whatever behind a lot of these films, where it's clearly like religious foundation, right? Surely it comes from the sort of religious moralities.
It would be, but no, I think it is. But I don't know how much of that's just sort of it sells, so we're going to do it. I don't get the sense that any of the great progenitors of the slasher movies are particularly religious people. I think I don't know what John Carpenter, I believe, is an atheist. I think he's a political liberal. He's an atheist. So I'm not sure how deliberate that was with him, but it's obviously
and I don't know that it is deliberate, but I think that like subconsciously within the minds of a lot of these filmmakers, it's come from somewhere, you've got to punish the kids that it's like the grown-ups punishing the kids for not doing what they're told. I don't know how interesting I find that.
No, but I think it's a way to be kind of. I think although there's a sort of, this has just occurred to me, although it does seem very, very sort of very puritanical sort of ethos. It's also a way just to get people out of their clothes as well, because if you've got all these like horny kids who deserve to die, and the film was largely made by probably horny middle-aged men, it's like, well, they deserve to die. we don't really think they deserve to die, but in order to demonstrate how much they deserve to die, they have to get their kit off and have lots of sex. So I think
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
lot
yeah, yeah.
there's so much of a double standard there. It's like it sells, it's like nudity sells, violence sells. Let's stick it all together. And even if that is a driving force, it's probably more driven commercially and salaciously than it is by a genuine, someone, sitting in a big pilgrim's hat financing these
Yeah,
films going, these
yeah.
children need to die, things like that. And
Yeah, I feel it's like sort of it's story passed along through time, subconsciously sort of infiltrating the way that stories are told around that time, or and have certain themes within them that, yeah, I don't think they're conscious. There was an essay on the Criterion Channel by Tom Allen, a writer who wrote the review in 1979 for The Village Voice, and he said that Halloween, after all, is a schlock film, the old one about the masked psycho ignited by any sign of pubescent sexuality.
but then
Yeah,
Norman Bates is that's in Psycho.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's in
That's
Psycho, isn't it? And it's
original
so it
Freudian.
starts with Psycho. I mean, they establish at the beginning of Psycho, and Hitchcock. People have written millions of words about Hitchcock's weird relationship.
Yeah, yeah,
With
yeah,
women,
with
and
women.
his
Mm.
the fact that he was possibly possibly didn't have a lot of sex, and sort of projected it all. This is a crude sort of reduction of the complexity of Hitchcock's sort of twisted psychology. But Hitchcock, that's a Freudian slip. Hitchcock's blonde
Yeah.
has become like a thing, hasn't it? It's just like this blonde, ideal blonde woman that he likes to torment, put through the ringer, and so you have Marion Crane played by Janet Leigh, who's clearly in a sort of illicit relationship at the beginning, and she steals a load of money, which is why she ends up in the ends up in the Bates Motel anyway, and Anthony Perkins is peeping on her, but he clearly can't do anything about it physically, so the knife becomes a substitute, and he has to dress up in women's clothes. All of that sort of stuff's there
His
in
knife
Hitchcock,
becomes a substitute for Hitch's cock, yeah.
basically.
What about Peeping
It's-
Tom as well? Peeping Tom was another massive influence on Halloween for John Carpenter. When was that made? Michael Powell's
that might have been the same year. I think that might have been the same year as Psycho. I
Psycho.
think it was definitely in the six. And the irony being that Psycho absolutely, commercially reignited Hitchcock's career and absolutely destroyed Michael Powell's career. It's like I don't think he made another movie after that. He was utterly blacklisted,
Wow.
and yeah, it destroyed him. It was revol I think it might have been the fact that one was an American film and one was essentially a British movie and financed, I think, by Britain. I might be wrong about that, but and I think I've not seen Peeping Tom, so I think Peeping Tom's a
I've
lot
seen
darker.
it many years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think it's a lot darker than Psycho, and I think yeah. And I think probably its subtext is more text. I think because it's like it's more up front and in your face in terms of like the psychopathology of its murderer. And I think you're because he's a filmmaker who kills people, isn't he? So obviously you're being put literally in his point of view in a way that you're not in Psycho. In Psycho, it's like the reveal for people who hadn't seen it was that this lovely Anthony Perkins, and I like Anthony Perkins. I love a lot of his pre-Psycho work in westerns and things like that, where he's always like the the sort of slightly beta male who has to learn to be a man, normally under the tutelage of Jack Palance or Henry Fonda and things like that. And so people would have known him as this kind of quite sweet guy. And so the revelation that he is the killer dressing up in his mother's clothes would have been, I suppose, absolutely shocking if you'd never seen, because we can't do that. We can't see Psycho the way people saw it at the
No.
cinema, when there was
Yeah.
no, when you could absolutely control the information and people could go and see a hit movie not knowing what was going to happen and not having any kind of prior inkling of the twists and turns. It's hard to kind of fathom how that could happen now, although it still does, I think. But and So I think that's there in Psycho and Peeping Tom. And also Frenzy, which is another a very sleazy, sort of, I like it. It's very sleazy though, sort of Alfred Hitchcock movie, again about another sort of sexually motivated murderer. So there are all these sort of outliers in the history, in Alfred Hitchcock leading up to Psycho. So I think he's more influenced by Hitchcock than anybody else, I would imagine.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, have you got anything else to add to it? I think we've done
Um,
a
well, just a couple of things. One thing I like to say, just the influence of Halloween. I mean, you obviously see it in the slasher movies, but I also think you see it in something in areas that horror movies you don't necessarily associate with Halloween directly. I think it's all over It Follows. I was watching this and I kept thinking about all the time. I kept thinking about It Follows and the way he uses the frame, and he'll have the still frame, and you'll see Michael Myers in the background in the corner, and the way It Follows works, which I think is one of the best, most effective horror and genuinely scary horror films of the last sort of 15 years. And and the whole thing with It Follows, it's about a creature that once it latches onto you, and again it latches onto people.
mm,
It's passed on through sex, although they kind of subvert that. They don't demonize the person, who's like the carrier. The men that pass it on are the kind of the real a-holes, and then there's this creature that will latch onto you and follow you and walk. And that's the thing, the scariness of walking. We talked about this with zombies. And I think one of the most frightening things about Michael Myers is he never runs. He walks, doesn't need to. He knows where you are. They don't really think he'll find you. The
mm,
Terminator's the most scary when he walks in the first one because it doesn't really matter because no one can destroy him. He walks. And then It Follows. The whole thing is that it walks, and wherever you are in the world, it will catch up with you because that's its entire purpose. And I think the music's very Carpenter-esque, and I think the way they'll hold a frame, and you don't know what form this creature's going to take, so you're just looking at the frame just to see if anything's amiss and anyone's walking in a funny way. I think that, and also in Hereditary, one of the things Ari Aster does in his horror movies is he spells out what's going to happen so there's a scene in a classroom where they're talking about fate and and everything that's said in the classroom in terms of the way Greek tragedy works has its working out in the rest of Hereditary. And in Midsummer, in the kind of commune that it all takes place in, they have all these paintings on the wall that on a second viewing tell you exactly what's going to happen to each
mm,
character. And there's a sort of discussion about fate in the classroom that Laurie Strode's listening to. There's a lovely bit where she's looking out. This is another nice character bit. She's daydreaming. She's looking out at the thing. And then she does what teachers do. You like when it doesn't look like you're paying attention. She asks her a question. She turns around and answers the question immaculately.
mm,
So she's doing
mm,
that sort of I think the thing that Jesse Eisenberg does in the Social Network, which says, "Have I got all of your attention?" He goes, "No, you've only got 20% of my attention because that's 20% of my attention is all I need to understand what you're
mm,
saying." And so she's like that. She turns around, she answers a question, but the whole thing about fate is played out with Michael Myers because Michael Myers zeroes in on her, and she's the one he's interested in, and it's about them too, and there's no reason for it in that they're linked somehow. They're kind of going to be dance partners in this horrible story, which
mm.
they kind of make explicit with the brother sister thing, which actually weakens that element. So it doesn't, because I
Yeah.
like the fact that it doesn't matter why he's latched onto her. He's come back for her. It's her destiny, her fate to sort of play this out with him. And I like those elements. So I think you see the influence directly and indirectly in so many horror movies. So love it or hate it, it's made its mark. And its influence is I think anyone who makes a horror movie probably, has to reckon with Halloween at some point, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
No,
I
and
agree.
obviously, Scream it's a deconstruction of Halloween to the point where I didn't realize, the bit that they is it Jamie Kennedy just no is it no it's Shaggy from Scooby Doo. I can't remember. Matthew Lillard does the rules of the horror film, and he does the "I'll be back," never say "I'll be back." I didn't realize that's a direct quote from Halloween that the boyfriend says I'll be right back, and then gets murdered.
Yeah.
That was just my ignorance. I would imagine everybody watching Halloween knew that was a direct, or Scream knew that was a direct reference. But I thought, oh, it's a direct reference. So yeah, no, that's all I've got to say. Other than I would say, what is your favorite John Carpenter movie?
It's 6-7
Yeah, we'll do a
between the
head and a
thing.
heart one. A head one and a heart one.
The head's the thing. The heart's Escape from New York.
Yeah, I think with me, the head is probably Prince of Darkness. The heart is Christine. I love Christine.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
must revisit that. I said you were
it
talking about that.
works
I've not
so
seen it for a
well. It's
long
really,
time.
really good.
Hmm.
But I have to say, the first cult movie I was ever into was Assault on Precinct 13. It's the first movie that I was ever really fanatical about, and absolutely adored that you would call a cult movie.
Did briefly on that in Escape from New York, the blonde-haired guy who was the
Yeah,
killer in Assault on Precinct 13. He was brilliant in
yeah,
Escape from New York, like brilliant. Like I don't think I'd ever really. I enjoyed his performance, but I don't think I ever noticed like how detailed everything that he was doing. It was almost balletic. Like his movements were sort of so stylized, and nobody else was like that in the film. You know, it wasn't like everybody else was. And I thought, what brilliant choices. And yeah, he didn't do as much as I thought he would have done. It's sort
no,
of
no, no. No,
shame.
yeah, no, he's phenomenal, and he's. I think he's the only like gang member with any real personality in Assault on Precinct 13. But that's
Yeah,
deliberate, isn't it? Because they are the whole idea is the gang is an entity, isn't it? And you
yeah.
just it's like the heads of the Hydra. You keep killing them, and they'll keep come at you. But yeah, he's phenomenal in that with his like sort of razor sharp teeth and his yeah, and and the way he hisses, but how Faye is when he talks, and and apparently, I think he was based on Caliban in The Tempest. I think, yeah, it's like
Nice.
Isaac Hayes was Prosper and he was Caliban in their
Ah,
island and things. So yeah, he's called Frank Doubleday. The only other thing that I've seen
Frank
him in
Doubleday. Yeah.
is a kind of weird 1980s um, horror movie with Pierce Brosnan called Nomads. So he's one of this strange gang of this kind of street gang that may or may not be demons that just sort of torment Pierce Brosnan, and it's him and an actress I really like called Mary Warrenow, who is one of Andy Warhol's Factory, and just crops up in some phenomenal horror movies and cult movies, and she's just a fascinating character. She's an artist now, and she's great. She's like in Death Race 2000 as is it Calamity Jane or Matilda the Hun? I can't remember, and
I don't think I've ever seen Death Race 2000, I
it's
really should.
fun. I'd love you to watch it and hate it, and then we could talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if I expect to hate it, I kind of expect to hate it in a way, but in that sort of B movie, the sort of stuff that you like that I doesn't tickle my fancy. Yeah, the whole audience as the killer, putting you what we were talking about before with Peeping Tom or even Psycho, because although it's not POV Psycho, the shower scene is POV. Like you're coming in, and audience being complicit, audience being the murderer. I like that as an overarching sort of idea, and maybe one thing that sort of helps to unsettle us as audience members, the fact that that darkness resides within us. Yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of like that. Yeah, on that philosophical note, philosophical. Yeah, until next time, we've got no idea what the next one is. So we're gonna have we'll go backstage, have a couple of Jack Daniels and a cigar each or something, and then see if we can discuss. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. I appreciate you, Adam. Thank you very much for that. That was a lot of fun. I look forward to the next one. And so from sort of sunny but cold Australia, hasta la vista.
Like scarily heat wavy England at the moment. Like we're not used to this. 30 degrees. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
The mission has been completed.
Groovy.